Cheers, everyone. Welcome to the New Populist. I'm Dave Brown. If you are new to the channel, please like and subscribe. Well, in a recent video, I was discussing this recent turn in this Russia-Ukraine conflict where Russian forces made a hasty retreat as the Ukrainian military plunged forward in this counteroffensive that for the first time in this war was effective. And as I mentioned, a lot of the people who support the Russian special operation, as they call it, were in a state of not panic, but they were really frustrated. They felt that the Kremlin, Putin, had been dishonest with the state of the operations as far as what their goals are. And I even pointed out that there was a video clip released by the Russian government showing reinforcements on the way, when in reality, this was a video that was taken from some other time. And it was meant to make the Ukrainians think that reinforcements were coming when no reinforcements were coming at all. And there were a lot of pissed off people on the Russia side of things. And some of them were calling for full mobilization, declaration of war. And even recently, we had a politician in the State Duma in Russia say that in order for Ukraine or Russia to achieve their objectives, there would need to be a full mobilization. Now, the question is, why hasn't Russia made this commitment? And we see this semantics here as far as when a country goes to war, they don't necessarily declare war. And the United States did the same thing with the Iraq war. We had an authorization of the use of force against Iraq, not a declaration of war. And yes, it's a lot of semantics here. But why in Russia's case, with when we think about the Ukraine conflict, why would they not have a declaration of war against Ukraine? And I think the answer is a little complicated, because what we're seeing right now from NATO and Russia is sort of this cat and mouse game where each side is doing something that the other side knows they're doing, but at some level are pretending that's not happening. For example, Russia says if NATO gives Ukraine certain weapons, it'll mean this, and then NATO does it, and then Russia goes, okay, well, if you do a little more, then we'll be really pissed off, and then we're going to respond. And so there's the two sides that are slowly escalating. Each side is trying to make sure they don't escalate too far. And so when you have a declaration of war, if Russia were to declare war, this would give Putin certain powers within the country. Now, people look at Putin as being an authoritarian, and certainly he is, but even an authoritarian needs support from the people around him, especially politicians within the country who have a lot of power. What happens when you don't do this? Well, the greatest example ever, of course, is Julius Caesar, when he had knives literally put in his back. And past the politicians, he needs the support of the people. When you characterize the action in Ukraine as a special military operation, it's not as dramatic as a declaration of war. And were they to declare war or fully mobilize, that might come with some internal unrest, and there might be a sway in the opinion for the war among Russians. So there are these internal politics going on in Russia that Putin has to take into consideration, as well as the rest of the government, as far as how they present this war to their own people. And another thing is, secondly, would be that their stated goal was not to take over the whole country. They wanted independence for a couple of these states that are pro-Russia, and some other security issues as well. But if they actually declare a war, now you kind of are committing to taking over the entire country, toppling the government, and getting that unconditional surrender. So now you're going from 25% of the country to 100% of the country. And Russia has taken 6 months just to get where they are right now. And even right now, they're scrambling a bit, trying to fix the situation that they just suffered from with this counteroffensive from Ukraine, causing their guys to flee backwards. And so, does Russia want to make that next commitment to a full-scale war, a full declaration of war, which will mean a massive increase in the scale of this war? And when that happens, there's also going to be a response from NATO. And a declaration of war will allow the NATO powers to go back to their countries and get more weapons. And that means more Russian troops being killed. That means more destruction of Russian equipment. And just the entire scale of the war increasing is a danger to everybody, not just Russia, because as this escalation increases, there's more chance of a direct confrontation between NATO and Russia. And when that happens, how long does that stay conventional? I'm American. I'm partial to our military. We spend $750 billion a year on defense. Russia spends $60 billion. We're going to win that pretty handily if we just have a conventional war. And that's the problem. Russia starts losing, they declared a full-scale war. At what point do they launch off a nuke? And of course, when that happens, it's mutually assured destruction, and everybody loses. So as this escalates, it becomes very dangerous. And Putin, I know people think he's an idiot, or, well, not an idiot, but people in the West in general kind of look at him like a jackass, like he's not surely a smart guy. But he absolutely is. He understands these calculations. You don't become the leader of a country for 20 years and not have some level of intellect. And Putin's, for all of his faults, is not stupid, and he knows that escalating is dangerous. And again, also, you escalate and you declare war. You can't stop again halfway. You can't go 50% and go, okay, now we're going to stop. That you can't go back to your people after declaring war and only conquering half the country and quitting. So a full commitment is comes with a declaration of war. And I think Putin is very shrewd to understand this, which is why, despite the recent embarrassment, he's saying, calm down, we're not going to react too much to this. Yes, we're going to send reinforcements, we're going to fire some generals, but ultimately we're going to stick to our main plan, which is to have a limited force within Ukraine to achieve the objectives that they set out to achieve. Now, will they be able to with this limited force? That's the question. Now we're gonna find out the answer to this over the next few weeks, I think. And the reason I say I think is because Putin and Russia, their time scale is different from the West. In the West, we're always looking for results right away. We get discouraged right away. Our attention span is really short. And Russia knows this. So is there a possibility he kind of lays low and then lets this thing drag out over time and then slowly reinforces and gets back what he wants? That's a possibility. But that would also depend, again, on the impact that the sanctions have on not just Russia, but Europe and the United States, and how committed NATO is to seeing this through and making sure that Russia loses. And all indications are NATO, which means the United States, we are all in. And we heard that German politician say they are willing to suffer to make sure that Russia loses, and that she does not care what her own citizens think. Beating Russia comes first. So I think this is a pretty dangerous situation. Again, I think Putin is smart enough not to escalate, but it is entirely possible. And I think that's why they're avoiding this mobilization, declaration of war, because they know when they do that, the whole game changes. And there's that unfortunate increase in the possibility of a wider conflict that again ends in World War III, where everybody loses. So that's my thoughts on that. Well, again, if you are new to the channel, please like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.